Morning. It's wonderful to. I had to drive back from the Bukit Timah campus this morning. It was lovely to come back to Cambridge and be with you. Let me introduce myself a little bit first. I am in charge of a bunch of subjects in the law faculty that we call the sort of skills component. So I'm in charge of some might think, impossible task of getting our students to actually analyze, reason, research for themselves, and hopefully be able to communicate what they have come up with in their minds in a cogent and clear way. So it's a legal skills courses that I'm in charge of at the law faculty where I come from, and specifically there are modules with very long and only lawyers can come up with type names like legal analysis, writing, and research. And today I'm going to share with you something that we've been working on in the last few years to try to crack this nut. When it comes to learning skills, one of the things that's kind of tough is to know whether the positive that you've got, the so-called right answer, came through by the correct process of reasoning, or whether it was just basically either good luck or very good cheat sheets from your seniors that get you there. And one of the ways we do that is to have very interactive classes, but they're mostly, therefore, geared towards students who are open to speaking up. And students who are willing to speak up and try their ideas out, there'll be a chance for us to kind of give them feedback, etc. But writing is a tough one because obviously there's sort of a traditional view of sort of writing as solitary work, right? You know, the lonely writer in his garret, kind of like going away. And you're assuming that somewhere in the student's brain there's actually work happening, but you know, maybe it's not work, right? I mean, maybe they're just staring out the window and they're supposed to be solitary and working. So how do you get inside a student's mind and try to see what's going on when they're writing? And I should at this point probably have a caveat, being a lawyer, and all the disclaimers, that I'm going to get excited about something that maybe is only exciting to us because, you know, lawyers, we're kind of like fuddy-duddies. We'd rather wear a suit, and we don't know anything about computers except Blackberries. You know, I mean, actually what we're using here is something fairly simple, but from the perspective of the law faculty, it was actually something quite exciting for us. So those of you who, for whom all the technical stuff, this is very, very low tech, you know, recall that many of my colleagues still prefer to use, you know, pen and paper, possibly, you know, with the ink pot if they could, but so, you know, let me set that context first, right? And then you can criticize as much as you like, all right? So traditionally, obviously, in the law faculty, our written assignments, you know, I mean, however much you play with it, what you're doing is you give a student an assignment of some sort, they go home, possibly they sit in a room in front of you and they write in that solitary fashion where I can't get in their head, then they submit something, right? And so in a way, because of the format, we're able to see quite a lot of the result, but we may not be able to see the process. Even in terms of the sort of feedback that we can give, we often have to choose between. Yes, me too. I can't give you anything. Yes, but we have to choose sort of between timeliness, like let's say we do an in-class exercise and then we'll sort of give comments straight on the spot, or detail, which often then means that we take, you know, the 20-page document home and, you know, give detailed comments on it, but it comes back quite a long time after the student's done it, right? And to some extent, I think our assessment has to then be a bit more summative than formative. It's less about how to give you, I mean, and very often because of the long time lag between the assignment being given and detailed comments coming back, there may not be so much left of the term, for example, for the student to do better. So in these ways, our written assignment constraints were, you know, not as good for teaching skills as we would have liked, because ideally, I mean, you want an activity when you are talking about skills of analysis and communication, you want to have an activity that tests substance as well as process, where the feedback is timely and detailed, and of course where you can give assessment that is both formative and summative, right? And for us, talkie lawyers, the quintessential model for us is something that we call moot court. So here's a picture of moot court where, you know, a student stands up and runs an argument by, you know, these rather sleepy-looking judges here, who then along the way will ask them questions, right? I mean, why do you use this particular word? Are you sure that the duty is reasonable rather than possible? If you are framing your argument this way, have you taken into account these facts or that facts? And on the spot, the student has to respond, and the student learns that way. And even in terms of their argument style, we can give them feedback right on the spot. So we can kind of say, well, you know, that's a little bit more hand gesture than you need. Please tone that down. Why don't you try speaking louder? We can't hear you. All these things we can give on the spot. And this is, in a way, this was the model that I wanted to aspire towards in terms of helping students to learn writing as well. Obviously, it's not 100% you know, the same, but to try towards it. So before sort of coming on Google Docs, we were even lower tech. I mean, you know, we would have things like one-on-one conferences with our students after their assignments. We would not play mahjong. Those are the days before the Marina Sands. We would use mahjong paper and use IVLE. So, for example, conferences, what we would do is, you know, after everything's been marked and all that, and we've given specific comments, we give them back to the students, and then we come in, sit with me, let me walk through the various comments, why did you do this, all that sort of stuff, right? But number one, you know, by this time, when I ask them something like, why did you put this argument up front? They're like, oh, really, I did that. I also don't know. You know? And they're like, oh, is that my work? Oh, yeah. I don't know, right? Because it's been so long from the time when they submitted it, right? You know, and also it's sort of, you know, it's tough to make it an open learning process, because very often these will be assignments that are for grades and all, and it's hard to kind of take a student's heart and you know, put it in front of a class and take it apart. So for these sorts of meetings to be effective, we tend to make them one-on-one, and so the learning is then just one-on-one as well, and it's less sort of group and interactive. The other thing that we like to sort of do, which was at the other end, was sort of to have mahjong paper. So this is just an example of I'd come into class with a huge piece of mahjong paper, and you know, ask students to write on while they're in class, and then, so this one is timely, I can give them comments, but obviously, first of all, their work is not so crafted because of the format, and secondly, the sorts of comments that I can give are also a lot less crafted, and, but students love this, and we continue to use this. It generates a lot of excitement in class. This particular case is not really so much about writing, it's about their analyzing a case and trying to extract a rule from the different judges. I mean, at this point, eyes ought to glaze over if they are glazing over, but it's just an example of how we use mahjong paper. IVLE, of course, once I had a 200-student class and tried to get them all to kind of write papers and then submit to IVLE, and then you choose one or two at random to put up. But again, you're still not really getting into process. You're only seeing the ultimate result. So anyway, enter Google Docs, how many of you already use Google Docs? Pretty much all of you, right? Oh no, I mean, see, this is the lawyer, I can hardly count. There was barely 1/3, but I said all. I don't know what it is. Okay, but for those of you who know Google Docs, right, it's a platform for, in a sense, the same document can be simultaneously accessed by different people online, and you can all work on it at the same time. And the difference between that and, say, multiple drafts under Word, which I, as a lawyer, used to hate because, you know, partner 1's comment, partner 2 comment, partner 3 comment, and try to figure all of it out. and which is the latest document and all that sort of stuff, right? Different revisions. The difference between that and Google Docs is that in Google Docs there's just one master document, and you know, it reflects through its history what has happened to it along the way, but at any given time, it shows what the latest writer has decided to do to it, right? And of course, it's accessible online. And so it seemed to allow the possibility for there to be a little bit of, for us to write together in a sense, and for me to actually see what the students are writing as they're doing it. So let me, anyway, show you a case study of what we did. So now, here was a topic that we do kind of midway through the year. We've analyzed a legal problem, and the students have given advice from an objective perspective, which is kind of, I'm sorry, but on a 50-50 chance, you're probably going to fail. Huh? I mean, you were just as bad as the other guy, your neighbor, too bad, right? But then the client says, die, I still must sue the other guy. I don't care, it's a matter of principle. I don't like his face. So, okay, I must sue. I know that my chances are only 50-50. Worse, I know my chances are only 40-60. But I want to try because 40-60, who knows, right? I mean, if you get Devinder Singh on your side and he persuades people. Devinder Singh, by the way, is one of our senior counsel here, and he's well known for being able to sell most things to most people. And so, you know, if you get him on your side, 40 suddenly looks like 55, looks like 60, so let's go for it, right? So one of the things that students have to learn how to do is to take what was previously an objective analysis and change it into something persuasive. And usually all we do with that is, you know, go home, take your previous assignment, and now put it in persuasive language, and I will mark it after that. A few years ago, we started doing this slightly differently. We said, why don't we do this in an interactive class? Right? So, and let's see whether on the spot you know what are the steps that go into taking something that's very, very even-handed and turning it into a bludgeon, right? So this is what we did. Let me see whether I can, okay, so now let's see whether technicals actually happen and work, all right? Actually, they do, because I already previously opened the page, right? So what I did was, let me just explain a few things here, right? So I'm now in my own Google Docs view. What I did was I prepared some documents. These are the sample documents that you start with. They're in objective voice, the so-called clean samples. They don't really make things in a forceful, persuasive sort of a way. And then what I did was I created, this is just because of the history, I did this class twice, but for the afternoon class, I created a folder, and I told students to form up in teams, and of 2, and to take the objective sample and just take a look at it and come into class. And in class, which was held in a room a little bit like this, with the projection and the students all around, bring their computers with it. In class, they would, on the spot, in their little pairs, try to change the document so that it would be more persuasive, and we've encountered an error, which I was ready for, so I have just done some screenshots for you instead so that you can see. All right, so this is the main thing. Okay, so here's the folder. My students were divided into pairs. Each of them then did their own starting document. And then basically the class started, and it was quiet, which was very frightening for me as a lawyer, you know, and as a teacher. It was very quiet, right? Because they're kind of sitting there thinking, and like every now and then they'll be talking between the pairs, like, you know, what do you think about this? But then like, it's like very frightening. Like, is nothing happening, whatever, right? But the good thing about Google Docs is that, of course, you can open the documents yourself, and you can start seeing what's happening there, right? So here are some things that you know, we could see. So like in an original sample, I noticed after a while that one team, right, it's a bit technical, but let me explain. The original opinion went against the client. So I said, we'll write it persuasively. So if you look at the original sample, it actually correctly starts by saying that the courts have actually denied this defense. Don't allow you to evoke it. And only in paragraph 6 does the student correctly, in the original objective version, say there's an alternative view. There is an argument that says that this particular defense is possible. So the students, I noticed, saw that, and of course the rest of the documents here, but what they did was they started and they wrote their first big sort of like punchy heading, starting at where the counter argument would have previously been on the objective memo. And so immediately I could see this, right? And meanwhile they're still all typing away, and as I was watching this, I then toggled to this particular document, and I was able to comment on it, right? In a very timely fashion. So what I was commenting on here was, I said, my comment is in blue, I said it's good to bring the counter arguments up front. That's correct, because your client needs those counter arguments first to be made. But you know, you've sort of cut out the views that go against you. Do you need to deal with the likely more orthodox view? And within a few minutes, the students saw what was needed. Basically, they just cut and paste, and they brought 5 back in, and they put 5 here, which is correct, right? And they were able to change it. So as you can see, I mean, it's not rocket science, and it's not especially exciting, but something happened here that I normally cannot do. I was able to. The other thing was, I could choose between either talking about it in the class as a whole or just writing my comments. So one of the things that happens when people are writing is that it can be very disruptive if I then say, oh, show me your work now, what are you up to here, right? I mean, how come you're right? And then it breaks the whole thing, right? So one good thing about my being able to comment just online like this quietly was it's for that group. That group can look at it, and then they can decide to respond to it, right? And after they responded to it, what I then did was I pulled this document up, and then I shared it with the class. So I said, here's what this team did very well. They saw that you should start with a counter argument, but they didn't deal perhaps with the arguments that might go against them, which would likely be actually the winning view. So you have to deal with it. But they've done very well now in bringing it up. And that part of it, so that part of it could at least be open and talking, and you know, all the different pairs would look up. And the other thing that was sort of interesting would be that, you know, you would pick a group like this that saw something, and then immediately if you go check the other groups, you'd see they all sort of start to, oh, what can I do that's similar but better? So they're actually seeing each other's drafting process and trying to kind of up the ante on it. Another thing that very often you don't get in writing. You get that very much in oral arguments. Someone's gone up to make a very good argument. Someone else listening then learns from that argument and tries to improve on it when it's their turn. But it's not so often that you can see that happening with writing, again, because it's solitary. So here, the phenomenon that occurred was the moment I sort of pointed out the organizational good stuff that this group did, you could sort of see all the other teams who hadn't done this already quickly go and like, oh, how should I reorganize mine? So it was a very nice way to combine a certain amount of interaction and group thinking, but also to allow people privacy to write on their own. I mean, obviously you can also see the students thinking. So I mean, I've had to sort of pull this out, but I mean, in real time what will happen is that just watch. And so here, obviously, the students, first they decided to end with a good punchy paragraph. So this is 0 because it's their own paragraph, not from the original document. At first they say the thread on whole was a menace, but then to make it stronger, they then add the word continuing. At first they overemphasized the difficulty. They said it did not create any opportunity to escape, but later they realized on the facts, no, that may be putting things too strongly, so they changed, did not create a reasonable opportunity to escape. And all of this was, you know, it was great, because then I can open it up and I can say again, I noticed this is what you did along the way. You started by saying any, but why did you change it to reasonable? It's weaker, so as persuasion goes, it's actually pulling it down, but what are the what's the thinking behind it? And then the students would say, well, it may be weaker, but if I try to be too strong on our facts, I'm going to actually be less credible. Good point, absolutely right. And we're able to see it through the process. And of course, Google Docs has kind of like a history of revisions function where you can also do this. And of course, the final step in all of this, which I won't, oh, yes, let me just show. So meanwhile, the team that I showed you is Lian Sheng and Rachel, I think. But, meanwhile, all the others are all there, so I can easily toggle between all the other teams who are working, right? And the nice thing about Google Docs is when it's all over and done, I can also go back and do the detailed comments. They don't take the mahjong paper back with them. Mahjong paper is very hard after that to go back and write further comments. This one, it's all up there on the site, and I can supplement with better comments at the end. For those not so used to Google Docs, maybe just to talk a little bit about the practicalities of it. You gotta make sure everyone has Google accounts. These days, almost all your students will. It's not a problem at all. You need to share the document. The one that's been embarrassing sometimes is it's only at the law faculty, We've gone to the older campus and the computer school has taken over our building and probably made it more techy, but we've gone backwards. Anyway, so back at Bukit Timah, the original campus, I'm teasing, but sometimes, our computers are so old that when we get onto Google Docs, as you saw just now, this OS or this browser is not compatible with Google Docs. I don't know, no Flash or something like that, right? So then nothing happens. So all these things you got to test, and of course the projection. Signing up for Google account, not difficult. Here's, basically it's very easy. Having created a folder or a document, you just click on it, click share, and then just invite everybody to share on it. One thing that was interesting for me was when I first started doing this about 3 years ago, some of my students would still write to me like, how do I get a Google account? How do I share? How do I sign in? This year when I did it, or last year, I haven't done it quite yesterday. Last year when I did it, all my students said, oh yeah, we already have our own little private Google group already, so just send it to our Google group and we'll all log in. So I said, okay, great. So it's also something that I think is increasingly becoming useful. Actually, for me, I work in a team with colleagues, and I won't say the difficulty, but I think that the real challenge is actually sometimes sort of getting some of my colleagues to also get in on it so that we can co-join classes between TGs. The students are usually more than able to help each other out, and so it's actually quite easy for them. That's about it. Obviously, there are many other users, and one thing that I found after sort of trying it out on the ever-ready guinea pigs, my students, I've tried it also for myself in the sense of collaborative design of exercises, for example, with other teachers. So we'll put a document up there and we'll comment with each other. And I'm not going to try to do this because my guess it will also encounter an error. But basically, I would have brought you to a page where we were trying to draft a hypothetical to be used by students, and all of my collaborators were sort of online at the same time, basically suggesting how to tweak it so that it would be maximally evil for the students. And I think we succeeded. So, it's good. Who knew? I mean, that you can... The interesting thing for me was that session, it was very frightening because it was not noisy in the usual way. It was actually quite quiet. But it was not quiet lazy. Sometimes you can tell when a room is quiet and nobody is thinking or doing anything, right? And so they are like just, and it's quiet. Actually, that's not quiet. But so, it's quiet in that way, but this was not a quiet session in that way. It was quiet, but you could sense that people were thinking, they were typing, there was intellectual activity going on, and you could hear it loud and clear when you looked at the documents, even if you might not be able to hear it in the normal way. And it was interactive because, as you can see, I could comment and they could comment back, and they could comment on each other's work as well. What was interesting is sometimes one pair, right, the slacker in the class, like, the other pair go and check their one first, right? So go and see, oh, that's what they're doing, come back and do it. I mean, there was that sort of learning going on from each other, and of course it was a group thing, not a one-on-one conference where it's kind of lonely and the student feels on their own. Everyone's work was sort of on show at the same time, so that it made it, I think in our culture, it made it easier for everybody to take the fact that someone at random might be commented on, and so who knew that writing could be noisy, interactive, and groupish? Yeah, and you know that lawyers like to be noisy, interactive, and groupish. So anyway, good ending, and happy to share more ideas with anyone. And I guess I should stop now and maybe take 2 questions or something. I'm almost out of time, right?